As presidential historian Douglas Brinkley comments about her book, with analytic verve and deep historical knowledge, Susan Jacoby documents the dumbing down of our culture like a maestro. Make no mistake about it, this is an important book. Now, Ms. Jacoby quotes Thomas Jefferson to begin her Age of American Unreason. Jefferson, 1816. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never was and never will be, which, of course, is why I too use as the title of our open mind today the thoroughly disheartening but now so often heard phrase, the dumbing down of America.
I myself was surprised at some of the studies I turned up that I cite in this book. The worst one, I think, is the National Geographic Roper poll of Americans from 18 to 25. After all, the age group that's doing nearly all of the fighting and dying in Iraq. And 2/3 of them can't find Iraq on a map that's marked with the names of countries. But more than that, when people were asked, in this age group were asked, is it important to know a foreign language? Or is it important to know the location of countries in which important news is being made? More than half of them said no. So, not knowing where Iraq is on a map, that's ignorance. Saying it's not important to know where it is on a map is saying I'm ignorant and proud of it.
Well, then let me ask you, what is the thrust of your beginning the book with the quote from Jefferson? Are you prophesying here that having dumbed down, we cannot also be free?
I consider it a cautionary quote. If things keep going the way they're going, if there isn't some kind of a concerted effort to deal with this problem, I don't see how anything in our political culture can get better.
But you seem to be, still to me, you seem to be kind of so uneasy about that Jeffersonian thought. Here it is. You can't dumb down and be free.
I am uneasy about it. I mean, we can be free technically in the sense that we go to the polls, but certainly the founders thought, it was really their main article of faith, that democracy and maintaining it depended on an informed citizenry, a citizenry that was much more widely informed and more committed to free inquiry than the United States was at the time of independence. That's why they had a lot of faith in education. But as your old teacher Hofstadter pointed out, democratization of education was always coupled in America with a suspicion of too much learning. So that the idea of practical learning for better jobs and maybe better citizenship was always an American ideal. On the other side, it was always this suspicion of the person who knows too much, talks too good.
So the pandering isn't all that new.
No, the pandering isn't all that new. But what has changed in the last 40 years, and again, Hofstadter couldn't have anticipated this. He was writing really at the beginning of the video culture. What has happened, I think, that has added to all of the endemic American anti-intellectual tendencies that Hofstadter talked about is the saturation of our culture by 24/7 infotainment, which was just beginning. And it shows itself in the fact that we are becoming a nation not of illiterates, but, as I say, of alliterates. We are people who increasingly don't read books. According to the National Endowment for the Arts in 2006, only more than half of Americans under 44 read no book at all last year, other than what they might have needed to read if they were still in school. By that I mean no book. I don't mean that they didn't read Proust or Henry James. I mean that they didn't read any book. No detective story, no bodice ripper romance, no self-help book, nothing.
And you agree with my other late friend, Neil Postman, that we are amusing ourselves to death.
Yes. And Neil Postman's book, which was published in 1986, was very prescient. He was published that book at the dawn of the computer era. In other words, he hadn't seen what the visual use of the web would do, and how greatly enhanced the ability of people to entertain themselves 24 hours a day would be by mobile digital technology. We've become so used to this. And the fact is, it's only 10 to 15 years that we've had the capacity through various portable devices to carry our entertainment with us 24 hours a day if we want to do it. And if you ride a bus in New York City, you know that a lot of people do want to do it.
And the consequences, more dumbing down.
The consequences are that for every time you spend in passive forms of acquiring information and entertainment, you're not doing something else. Now, if you've read any of the reviews of my book, you see that some of them have taken me to task for being a technophobe, and I'd sort of like to answer the critics who aren't here. I'm not a technophobe. I simply point out that computers, the web, they're tools. They're wonderful tools. They're great tools for getting information. I'm really happy that when I forget a date, that I don't have to go through 10 books to find it. I can just click on the internet and find out what the date of some battle was, or how to spell the name of some country whose name has been changed. But that's just information. It's a shortcut to getting information. That information doesn't mean anything, one, if you don't know how to look for it. That is to say, you don't know what you're looking for. But most particularly, it doesn't mean anything if it doesn't connect to a body of knowledge. I'd compare it to the web to a calculator. Now, when I do my tax returns, I don't add up the figures by hand. I use a calculator when I send stuff to my accountant. But I know, for example, I understand fractions and percentages. If something came out $100,000 that ought to be only $10,000, I would know immediately in my head, because I understand the basic processes of math and percentages, that it was wrong. I might not know the exact dollar amount it was wrong, but I would know. But kids who only learn calculators can get the right answer, but if the calculator goes haywire, they'll be at a loss if they don't understand percentages and fractions. And just as an aside, our 15-year-olds are nearly at the bottom in all developed nations in their math literacy. So this is a kind of across-the-board thing. Well, the relationship of computers to knowledge is very much like the relationship of calculators to math. What computers have in them is what we put in them. What we get out of them is what we look for in. So if you're looking for great things, you can find them on the internet. And if you're looking for garbage, if what you want to do is watch people indicting their estranged spouses on YouTube and throwing up on YouTube, you'll do that. Garbage in, garbage out. Now, a lot of people are very angry at me for saying that computers are just tools. And I don't know why. This may be one of the problems that America has, is an almost childlike faith in technological solutions to every problem, as though what was on the web isn't what people have put there, as though it exists as some kind of a godlike source of knowledge.
What then? You've been an historian here in this book. Turn out to be a prophet, and what do you prophesy?
I really hate to be asked that question. I don't feel very optimistic. I particularly don't feel optimistic because just since I've been writing this book, there has been a push by video marketers to reach the last untouched market, which are children from infancy to about 2 years old. Until a few years ago, what was available in videos was aimed at 2 years and above. Now they're promoting various things like Home Box Office's Classical Baby. They're promoting it for infants from 6 months old. And when pediatricians, so the American Academy of Pediatrics says there is no safe level of viewing for kids that young because it stunts vocabulary development, among other things, A psychiatrist from Harvard Medical School, who, guess what, is also a consultant to HBO, came out with the incredible statement: to say that this kind of TV for babies is bad is tantamount to saying that art is bad. Well, this shows you, this is the reason I called this book The Age of Unreason, by the way, and did not use the word anti-intellectualism in the title. This is obviously a very well-trained man making an utterly unreasonable statement.
Unpaid, well-trained person, do you think?
I wouldn't know. I assume nobody. I assume when you're a consultant to HBO, you get a consulting fee.
You and I have to think about still another field, and that is prenatal use of television. Maybe there are bucks to be made there. Okay, you and I.
You mean put a camera in the woman's uterus? I see it. I see it coming.
Good business. Look, I'm quite serious. You are considered anti-technological. I'm so frequently called a Luddite to my face. What is going to happen? Others don't seem to have experienced, though if you turn to Europe, you see that the electronic revolution, excuse me, has taken hold even more than it has here, but seemingly not with the same educational consequences.
I think that is a really important question, because obviously the empire of infotainment doesn't have any national boundaries. What makes us more susceptible in other cultures to the worst as opposed to the best parts of the digital revolution? I think one of the things that makes us more susceptible is something I already mentioned, which is our kind of love affair with technology, the idea that it is more than it is. The other thing that makes us more susceptible, I really believe, is the fact that everybody who is brought up since World War II, let's say, everybody my age and younger, has been brought up with the idea that we're number one. We're number one covers a multitude of sins. It's almost like a thumb-sucking security blanket saying we don't have to do anything more. And when you look at these studies about our math and our science students and so on, you know that we're not going to be number one much longer. In many areas, such as manufacturing, we're no longer number one. In certain scientific areas, we are also on the verge of not being number one. And certainly this has, but the idea that we're number one is very, very powerful. And in a way, it kind of impedes thinking about solutions, because if you just fall back on we're number one, and also American exceptionalism, we're different, we're better, and don't look at what's really happening in the world, then you don't think about solutions. Now, I have to say, since I published this book, I have received literally thousands of emails from young parents who are concerned about this. All I wanted to do with my book was to start a conversation about this subject, which has to precede anything we might do at the public level to impede some of these forces that are dumbing us down. And one of that conversation has to be about how we use our own time and how we allow our young children, because those are the only people parents have any control over. Once they go off on their own when they're about 6 or 7, we have less and less control over them. I've had so many people come up to me after talks and say, I'd love to read more, but I just don't have the time. Well, what we have to be thinking about as part of this conversation is, why don't we have the time? In our households, we have the time to have television on 7 hours a day. Young boys have 3 hours a day to spend on video games. Now, if you are spending all of your time on these things, whether you're a parent vegged out on the couch, or a kid using video games or spending hours on MySpace, then of course you don't have time to read books. Of course you don't have time to think quietly. You don't have time to do any of those things, but there isn't any law that says we have to keep spending our time this way. And by the way, I am not one of those people who thinks that nobody should ever watch TV or you should never let your kid watch a video. The problem is let's say the hour when you put a kid in front of a video, when you come home and you want to talk to your spouse and you want to have an hour of uninterrupted adult conversation, that's not a problem. The problem is when that hour turns into 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 habitual hours hours, when it occupies the weekends. That's the problem. And that, I believe, is the first force dumbing down our culture. All of the others, in a way, are secondary to it. The soundbite that has become our political culture is a product of this culture of infotainment.